And again, juggling between the courthouse and the campaign trail, former President Trump denying wrongdoing while decrying election interference. He also gets a legal win amid the postponement of his sentencing. NTD's Iris Tao has more from Trump's press conference earlier today at the Trump Tower in New York City.
Holding a press conference after his court appearance in New York on Friday, former President Trump strongly denies allegations by E. Jean Carroll, calling the case a hoax and election interference. Trump earlier today attended the oral arguments in his appeal of a $5 million verdict that found him liable for sexually abusing writer E. Jean Carroll decades ago. And Trump's lawyers argued that a judge allowed for the improper use of some evidence and the improper exclusion of some other evidence, which unfairly corrupted jury deliberations leading to the verdict. Trump, meanwhile, complained about a piece of evidence not being brought up by his lawyers today while being flanked by them at the presser.
I have all this legal talent. But legal talent cannot overcome rigged judges. They can't overcome a 4% Republican area. And I'm disappointed in my legal talent, I'll be honest with you.
Trump also used his speech to criticize the latest jobs report and said he's heading to hostile territory in next week's debate. But while it's billed as a press conference, Trump did not take any questions. Aside from his civil case, Judge Juan Merchan in Trump's New York hush money criminal trial on Friday delayed Trump's sentencing from September 18th to now November 26th. That means Trump will no longer be sentenced or face jail time before the election. Trump, applauding this development, further called for the case to be, quote, rightfully terminated. And before next Tuesday's debate, Trump will hold another rally in the key battleground state of Wisconsin. Reporting by Iris Tao, NTD News.
Judge Juan Merchan is delaying the sentencing in former President Trump's New York case until after the election. How might this impact his candidacy? We're happy to have Zack Smith, Senior Legal Fellow and Program Manager at the Heritage Foundation's Center for Legal and Judicial Studies. Zack, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me on the show this evening.
Absolutely, Zack. Let's start with the case in which Trump has been convicted of falsifying business records related to payments to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. His sentencing is now delayed until November 26th, after the presidential election. Is this a reasonable move and an expected move from a legal perspective?
Well, I think it certainly shows that Judge Juan Merchan understands the seriousness of the case, the unprecedented nature of this case. Never before have we had a former president and a leading presidential candidate who's been convicted of a crime and facing possible imprisonment. Now, ordinarily, someone convicted of the charges of which Donald Trump has been convicted there in Manhattan would likely not be facing a period of incarceration. But nothing about this case to date has really followed standard practice and procedure. And so certainly under the relevant statutes, he's eligible for a sentence of incarceration. And given the unprecedented nature of this case and how things have unfolded so far, that sentence certainly is not off the table. But keep in mind, not only does Judge Juan Merchan still have to impose a sentence on Donald Trump, he still has to rule on the immunity question that Donald Trump's lawyers have raised in this case. When the U.S. Supreme Court decided the immunity decision last term, they said not only could a president or former president be prosecuted for official actions, but those official actions couldn't even be used as evidence against that president in any other civil or criminal proceeding. And so that is an issue that Judge Merchan will also have to resolve. And it looks like he is also going to rule on that issue in November after the election has taken place.
And to that point, how do you see this immunity ruling being applied to this case? How may it be applied? And how do you see the sentencing play out? Could it look different if Trump wins the election?
Well, certainly the political aspect of this shouldn't play into the calculus at all. Everyone is supposed to be treated equally under the law, regardless of who they are, whether they're running for office or any of those other types of considerations. Now, the immunity question will be just one of many potential appellate issues, depending on how Judge Merchan rules, that a New York appellate court will have to address. I've talked before at length about the many issues that arose during this trial that likely were reversible error when an appellate court reviews this case, but we'll have to wait and see how it plays out. But certainly, the argument that Donald Trump and his lawyers are going to make to Judge Merchan is that some of the testimony that he allowed the jury to hear was improper because he likely should have been immune from use under the U.S. Supreme Court's decision.
Now, this morning, Trump was in one of the New York courtrooms to appeal that verdict in the E. Jean Carroll case. A reminder for our viewers, E. Jean Carroll won, I believe it was $5 million in damages following a trial last year. Trump's legal team argues that testimony from two other female accusers was improperly admitted at the trial. How strong is this argument?
Well, we'll have to wait and see what the appellate court does in this case. John Sauer, who's a former Missouri Solicitor General, who also argued one of Trump's cases at the Supreme Court last term, presented arguments in this case as well. But look, I think there are certainly troubling aspects about this case as well, regardless of what the court decides. There was evidence that the court did not allow the jury to consider, including certain interviews that Ms. Carroll gave after this incident took place and immediately around the time of the trial as well. And so this is one of the many legal cases with very serious legal issues that Donald Trump and his legal team are actively working to combat right now.
Now, there's also Jack Smith's January 6th case, which was redrafted after the immunity ruling. Do you think there is substance to this case, and what are the chances of this one moving forward?
Well, look, again, we're in unprecedented territory. Essentially, what Jack Smith did, he issued something called a superseding indictment. It just means that he amended the indictment. Now, ordinarily, a superseding indictment, that's typically bad news for criminal defendants because usually it means that a prosecutor in a case has added additional charges against that defendant. But that's not what happened in this Washington, D.C. case that Special Prosecutor Jack Smith has brought. He left in place the original 4 charges that he brought against Donald Trump, but he essentially changed the factual basis underlying those charges. He removed certain facts related to Donald Trump's discussions with Justice Department lawyers because the U.S. Supreme Court said that Donald Trump enjoyed absolute immunity for those discussions. That was part of his job as president, and so he can't be prosecuted for that. Jack Smith also took pains in other places throughout the indictment to make clear that, in his view, certain actions that Donald Trump took in the aftermath of the 2020 election were taken in either his personal capacity or his political capacity, but not in his official capacity as president. And so that, again, this immunity question is one that Judge Tanya Chutkan, the federal judge who's overseeing this D.C. case brought by Jack Smith, that she will likely have to rule on as well. Judge Chutkan will likely also have to rule on whether or not Jack Smith was constitutionally appointed. Keep in mind, that's what Judge Eileen Cannon in Florida used to dismiss the documents case against Donald Trump, but Judge Chutkan hasn't addressed that issue in this Washington, D.C. case yet.
Zack Smith, certainly not to be confused with Jack Smith, as if we haven't confused our viewers enough with this litany of cases. Zack Smith, senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.
And the Harris-Walz team says it's raised a total of $361 million in the month of August. And they haven't been shy about pointing out that that's almost triple what the Trump-Vance campaign has raised during the same period. NTD's Jason Blair brings us an update.
The Harris-Walz campaign is calling it the, quote, best grassroots fundraising month in presidential history. They've announced that nearly 3 million donors contributed in August alone, and that 95% of those donations were under $200. The Harris team also says that their data shows more than 60% of their August donors were women, and almost a fifth were registered Republicans or independents. They say they have $404 million currently on hand and that they've raised a total of $615 million since the beginning of the Harris presidential campaign. The Harris-Walz campaign managers said in a statement Friday, as we enter the final stretch of this election, we're making sure every hard-earned dollar goes to winning over the voters who will decide this election. Former President Trump's campaign announced on Wednesday that they've raised $130 million in August and have a total of $295 million on hand. Both campaigns have been hitting battleground states with hundreds of millions of dollars worth of paid TV and digital ads. Harris's team announced a $370 million buy running from Labor Day through November 5th. For the upcoming debate in Philadelphia, Kamala Harris is preparing by staying in Pittsburgh. Lawyer Karen Dunn is heading the vice president's prep plan. Dunn has a long list of high-profile clients in this area, including Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. She has trained Democrats for debates in every election in the past 16 years. Trump, on the other hand, has not announced any formal debate preparation plans. He's remaining active on the campaign trail with press interviews and event appearances on his schedule. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.